You'd open your Bibles, please, to Exodus. Exodus chapter 2. It's good to be with you again. This is my first Sunday morning without wearing my mask. So I had to shave extra carefully. And I have a whole bunch in the vehicle. And I work in a hospital, so I'll be wearing one for the rest of my life, I think. But it's good to be here this morning. It's good to be in the same room. It's great that there are people joining on Zoom. That's wonderful. That's great technology. And we've come along. We've gotten much more used to that over the last 2 years. But it's great to see everyone again. And it's good to be here. And a couple weeks ago, I spoke on Exodus chapter 2 just after Mother's Day. It was on my mind. Mothers need recognition every day, not just once a year, but one day a year we pause, don't we? And if no other day, we send some card, flower, something to our mother and say thank you. But in Exodus chapter 2, there is a mother I just want to look at, and then it says here, there went a man of the host of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein. And she laid it by the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and the maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." Imagine that, getting paid to be a mom. Anyway, not common. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." This is a familiar story, I know. But I find it fascinating, and just to try and put myself into the mindset of what these people were dealing with. That they had been slaves in Egypt for centuries. And it would be very easy for them to just assume that they would always be slaves in Egypt. Unless they remembered that God told Abraham that there would be a time when they would be set free. Because God told Abraham that the nation would go, his family, his descendants would go into Egypt. But he also told them he would bring them out again. And so here we have these people, this young couple, the tribe of Levi. And we see in verse 2, and we don't have Jochebed's name here, we get it from another passage, but we see this lady Jochebed, and she bears a son. And what I notice is that she was the one that did the noticing. And that might be true in your house as well. But she noticed in this child, it says in verse 2, when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, that there was something special about this child, that she recognized that this child was precious. And every child is precious, but she saw something in this child, and she thought, this child is a special child. It says she saw. She saw that he was a goodly child, and she hid him 3 months. Think about that. We know in the previous chapter that Pharaoh charged all his people in the last verse, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. There was a death sentence on this child, and there would be punishment for her if she was caught, but she saw that he was a special child, and she, at risk to her life and to her family, hid him 3 months. For 3 months, they had to try and keep everything quiet and act like everything was normal and carry on with the regular activities of the home. But she hid him 3 months. Imagine the stress of those 3 months. But verse 3 says, when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein. So you can see her as the child grows and becomes larger and no doubt louder and harder to hide. She realizes she needs to do something different. Otherwise, this child is going to be discovered. And so she takes it upon herself and says she took the bulrushes and she took an ark. She built a basket for this baby. And you can see the care. She daubed it with slime, with pitch, just like Noah did to the ark. She did it to this basket, didn't she? Why? Because she wanted it secure, a safe place. And she took personal interest in making sure this was done. But then it says, and she put the child therein. Imagine how difficult that must have been. You take this baby out of your arms and to put it into the basket. Not knowing how the story was going to end, she puts this child into the basket. Not knowing if she get the child back. And then she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. She picks a spot carefully where she thinks this child is going to lie undiscovered, where this child is going to remain safe. And then his sister stood afar off to what would be done to him. We see the mother leave. She left that baby in the basket. And she left her daughter to keep an eye on it. And she left. She couldn't stay there. She knew that her being there by the basket would cause attention. So she had to leave that baby in that basket and leave it with God. But this is where things get very interesting. The daughter of Pharaoh comes down, doesn't she? And when I was sharing this near Mother's Day, after Mother's Day in Perry Sound, I mentioned that she asked the daughter to look after the baby. But we were talking about it afterward, and it was pointed out to me that it doesn't say she asked the daughter to look after the baby, does it? It says that the sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And what I was wondering is that we were talking about this and the fact that we're talking about here, she sees that the baby is a special baby and she acts in out of care and love for this baby, and she takes all the steps that she can to the point where she can no longer safely hide this child, and so she places him in this basket in the river, and then she has to step back. And at this point, she has to leave the results with God. She can't do any more. But the sister, she stayed within sight of this basket. And we know this is Miriam, and she's watching this basket. And we talked about why she might have been watching that basket. And wouldn't it be interesting to ask her, why did you stay? What if she stayed to see what God would do next? Because she knew that she was an Israelite. Her parents had no doubt told her about the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and about his mighty power, and about how he created all things. And she knew that this baby was on the heart of her parents. Wouldn't it be neat if she just waited to see what God was going to do next? Well, regardless of her motives, she got to see firsthand what God was going to do next. And it says here, the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself by the river, and her maidens along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. Imagine seeing that. Oh no, here they come. Oh no, they see the basket. One of them's going for it. What is going to happen? Well, the baby, right on cue, cries. It's a good time to cry, Moses. And God moves in the heart of Pharaoh's daughter, the only one that would be above the law. God moves in her heart, and she has, we read, had compassion on him. Even though she recognized this is one of the Israelite babies, she had compassion on him. God softened the heart of Pharaoh's daughter to have compassion on this child. But then look in verse 7. Isn't this amazing? This is where Moses' sister steps into the action. And she says, shall I go and call thee a nurse of the Hebrew woman that she may nurse the child for thee? What an amazing thing to say. And here we see this young girl with bravery and wisdom deal head on with a terrifying situation. Here she didn't know if her young brother was going to be handed over to the soldiers, or if there was going to be a search made for the family that had hid this child for obviously a little while. She didn't know how the story was going to play out, but she, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, I believe, speaks to the daughter of Pharaoh. And with bravery and wisdom, she becomes a piece in God's great plan for the ages. And her words allowed this child to be returned back to her mother. And listen to Pharaoh's daughter's reaction in verse 8. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Imagine that. Mom, you will never guess what God has done. I got you a job. I don't need a job. I got you a job. You'll like this job. Come, you don't even have to bring a resume. And here Jochebed receives her own son back with the protection of the daughter of Pharaoh. And out of Pharaoh's own coffers come the money to pay this mother to look after her own child. Isn't God wonderful? Isn't he the God of miracles? Can't he do more than we can possibly imagine? And it says the child grew. In verse 9, the woman took the child and nursed it, and the child grew. And she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and so on. I was just thinking how amazing it was that God used this young girl just from a slave family to further the nation of Israel and his plan for the ages, and so that Moses' life would be preserved. And he even brought her back to Jochebed. And Miriam played this critical role just because she was waiting to see what God would do next. She got to the point where she could do no more until God acted. And then when God moved, she saw an opportunity and she did what she could, and she did exactly what needed to be done. And God used her for that. Let's go to Exodus 15 for a moment. And in Exodus 15, it's a completely different scene, isn't it? In the last verse of chapter 14, it says, and Israel saw the great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. What happened? Oh, the waters just closed over the Egyptian army. Pharaoh and his chariots were submerged under the Red Sea in front of their eyes. That's what happened. And then it says in chapter 15 and verse 1, then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. And this is a verse that is beautiful. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him a habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. And then at the end of the chapter, verse 19, for the horse of Pharaoh went into his chariots and his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought again the waters of the sea upon them. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. And Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously, and the horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. I find it fascinating that Miriam is able to lead in worship at this time of great victory. And I wonder how much of it is directly related to what she saw when she was a kid, because she waited for God to act and recognized God's hand in her life, and recognized there was something that she could do for God to further his kingdom. May the Lord encourage you to do what it is that he's given you to do with his own wisdom and power.